Welcome to a world of dark neon cities, pounding bass lines, and retro-futuristic energy. This is Aggressive Synthwave, a sound where 80s nostalgia meets modern electronic firepower. I'm Taylor, and I produce music as the Rave Barn. In this Sonic Academy course, we're diving into a style inspired by artists like Fool, Alvision, Power Glove, and Bronson. It's gritty, cinematic, and high impact. We're building an original track from the ground up, something in the vein of Blood or Mercenary, but fresh and entirely our own. You'll learn how to design basses, drums, effects, and synths that hit hard, build breakdowns and drops with drama, and mix it all into a polished, modern sound. If you've ever wanted to create music that sounds like a cyberpunk car chase, this is the place to start. So let's get into it. All right, so I went ahead and added some markers to kind of show the layout of the track. So let's just kind of quickly lay everything out. I'm gonna paste those in there, and then we'll grab these and just highlight this section here, Control D, and then do the same for this huge drop section. And then we want to kind of progressively build this up. So let's grab our perks here, put that there. I'm gonna have our open hat extend throughout this breakdown, and we're gonna kind of build it up the same way throughout this main drop area. And now we have a little bit of structure to work with. So let's get to work on some synths. I'm going to add a few MIDI tracks here. We'll just group these. We'll call this main synth, colorize the whole thing. Now let's work on our first layer of bass here. So I'm going to add a new MIDI clip, grab Anna 2, and for starters, I'm just going to initialize the preset. We'll flip back over to our MIDI here, and we'll start in D. And we'll just create a little pattern here. Very cool. We'll duplicate that. I'm kind of creating this sort of rolling bass line that's got a little bit of waviness to it. Grab all that and we will duplicate it. Get rid of those last two. Cool, let's call this bass main, and we will flip back over here and open up Anna. Now for our waveform, we're going to use a more analog sounding saw. So let's grab saw mini, which is kind of like a Moog saw. And then we're gonna make our sub a triangle wave. And let's just copy this to 2 and 3 for now. Then we're gonna take our voices up to 2 on oscillator 1, and we'll back off on that detune a little bit. We're also gonna give this first oscillator a bit of sub. And then moving over to our second oscillator, let's take this down 1 octave, add just a little bit of sub on that, and let's give it 3 voices. We're also going to shift the phase a little bit, so now we've got it sound like this. We're just going to rotate that phase a little bit more. And then for our third oscillator, we're going to leave that on 1 voice. We're going to drop that 2 octaves with no sub. Now we'll go to our filter, and we'll select Moog LP, and we want all the envelope. We'll take our cutoff right all the way down. And then for our filter, we're just going to give it a little bit of attack here, maybe just half a millisecond to get rid of any clicks. And we want about half a second of decay there. For the release, we could take that all the way down, and let's modify that curve a little bit. All right, let's play with our filters a little bit. And then we're going to be doing some velocity adjustments. So let's turn our velocity up to 100%. And let's take our amp envelope, and we're just going to turn the sustain down, take that release down to about 20 milliseconds, and we'll tighten up our decay a little bit. And we'll move over to our effects section here. And we'll go to modulation and add JU60. I love that they added the plugin into Anna, so now you can use it directly in there without having to bring in a second plugin, which is super cool. We'll change it to type 1. We'll make sure that's on, and we'll take that dry wet down. So we're going to grab roar really quick And we're going to switch this routing over to single band and then just give it a little bit of amount. We'll make sure the compressor is turned off there. And now we will add my all-time favorite Ableton effect, which is Saturator. We'll drag that on here. We can just leave it on analog clip and just give it a few decibels of drive. And then back over to the MIDI, we can play with this velocity a little bit. So now we've got a little bit of variance going on. Let's highlight this section here at the end. I'm just going to hit B, and I'm going to hold Control or Command on a Mac, and then I can draw this line in here. So I just click and drag, and then we'll add a little gradual line. So we can go ahead and duplicate that, and now we have our first drop. And we can duplicate this over to the other sections here. And let's duplicate that over to our huge drop section as well. And now let's do a little bit of automation to spice things up. So I'm going to grab the amount on our roar here, and I'm just going to click Show Automation. And let's add a couple of breakpoints here and bring this way up and add a bit of a curve. Now let's boost the energy on our second drop. So I can just highlight this area here and click this little square in the bottom. Let's add a bit of a spike here. So what we could do is we can highlight this section here and then just grab one of these corners and turn that way up. Maybe add a little bit of a curve to it. So it kind of feels like a filter is opening and closing. It's distortion, but it kind of sounds like a filter. And as we progress, let's add a couple break points here. We can kind of ramp this up. Let that kind of close on that last beat there. And then for our last drop, let's just punch this up. We can leave it static, or we could copy and paste our automation there. And let's grab a copy of this MIDI and let's drag it over to our alt drop section. And then we can just give that like a little pinch of distortion. So it's more than the intro, but it's not as much as these bigger drops. Now let's change this entirely from those earlier drops. That's a different line. We can copy and paste and have it go up, and then we will have it descend chromatically. And maybe we can extend one of these. And the trick here is going to be in our velocities. I'm going to tweak these a little bit to create more of a groove. And then I'm going to do a similar thing throughout. So now we're going to take our main bass and we are just going to duplicate that track. And this is going to be our intro and outro bass. So let's just say IO bass. We can just scoot these guys over here, and we'll delete all of this stuff here, and we'll throw that at the end. In fact, we can grab this one that extends and put that at the end there. And then we're going to nix this saturator we've got on here. We're also going to show all of our automation, and we could just nix all of that automation and just set an amount that we like. Now let's grab an EQ8. And we're just going to filter out all of these lows and a lot of these highs. Give it a little nudge there. We can also sort of distort out some of those lows by changing the bias on roar. All right, now let's start adding some layers. So I'm going to grab another copy of Anna, and let's just grab a copy of this MIDI to start with. And we are going to initialize the preset, and then let's go over to waveform, and let's grab a triangle. We're going to grab triangle analog. Then let's switch over to our second oscillator here. And for our second oscillator, we're going to grab a tri-saw mini, and we're going to be turning the volume all the way down on that second oscillator. Switching over to our first oscillator here, we're also going to switch our sub over to a sine, and we're just going to add a little bit of FM from oscillator 2. We're going to crank that sub all the way up, maybe back off on the volume a little bit because this is going to get really loud. Let's drop it an octave, and then back over to our second oscillator here. Let's make a few tweaks. Let's drop that 2 octaves. Let's add some sync. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we have this oscillator playing, even though there's no audio coming out. So we'll change the voices up to 1. And now we're going to add some FM from oscillator 2. And let's take a listen to what we've got. We're also going to turn retrigger on both of these oscillators. Let's come down to our filter, and we're going to select Mogi low pass and bring that down to about 30 hertz. Give it some action from our envelope. We're also going to give it a healthy amount of drive. Take that cutoff right down. Coming over to our envelopes for that filter, let's get probably about 700 milliseconds on the decay. And let's just soften up the attack a little bit so that we don't get any clicks. Turn the release all the way down. Maybe add a little bit of sustain. We don't need to do anything else with our other envelopes here, but we are going to spice this up a little bit. Let's go over to our LFOs here, and we're going to change our LFO target to oscillator 1 FM amount. And then let's play with our depth a little bit. We just want a tiny bit of depth here. Turn on sync, and let's do 16th note. We just want a pinch. If I turn it all the way off, and then let's just creep it in. That just kind of gives us a little bit more texture to this sound. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go over here, we're going to choose mono and slide. Let's take the polyphony down to 1. And let's turn the portamento up a little bit. Now let's grab OTT, go over to multiband dynamics, and this comes with Ableton, and let's start juicing up the high end of this. Now this is getting really loud, so we're going to turn the output like way down. And let's change our split frequency. Cool, now let's grab roar, and we're just going to add some distortion here. So I'm just going to choose serial here, and then let's turn off stage 2 for now while we work on stage 1. And I'm going to pick fractal. I really like this distortion style. Then for our filter, we can grab a comb filter. Crank up that resonance a little bit. And there's a lot you can do with the comb filter on this distortion if we wanted to automate that. Or map it to an envelope or something. I think we're just going to leave it static for now. And then let's turn on our stage 2 here. We just want to double check that our blend is 50-50, so we're getting equal amounts of both distortions here. And then I'm going to go down here and choose shards, and let's turn that up. And let's switch over to a high pass here. And I want to make sure our compression is off. Now let's take a listen to what this sounds like in the mix. And so you can hear our main bass, it's pretty dynamic if we just listen to that. It works well, and it still leaves space for a lot of the drums, but because there's so much more top end in our mid bass, it's kind of clouding everything. If I mute the main bass, we just listen to this mid bass with the drums. It's a lot more chunky, and it's kind of getting in the way. So I'm just gonna create a new channel here, and we're gonna sidechain this. Let's just grab that kick and let's have it go throughout the entire thing. And then I'm gonna go over to kick, and we can just initialize the preset. Let's get rid of this sub. And let's just add a click. So that should sound like. Let's just mute that, and then let's grab a compressor here, bring it over here, open up our external sidechain, and we're going to change the source to this new kick track that we've made. Let's just make that called SC for now. And then let's go ahead and change our view a little bit so we got a better idea of what's going on. Turn up our gain a little bit from that. We just play with our attack settings and release settings and kind of dial that into something that works with the track. Cool, and we might add some more ear candy stuff to this, but for now, we can just copy this to our main drops, and then over here on our secondary drop, we're gonna do something a little bit different. So let's add a MIDI clip there. And we can just grab our bridge bass here as well. Okay, and then just to spice things up here, we're gonna copy some of this data, and we're going to change the octaves. And this mid bass is going to be our sort of supplementation layer. We can change the color of the sound just by switching the octaves. So I go down an octave, and now for the intro. And then maybe in this little break here, we go up an octave. And then we'll take this last bit, go down an octave there. And then let's go an octave up here. So we can just grab all of this MIDI, hit shift up, and now we're an octave up here. Then for our final drop, I think we'll be better off just having this whole thing up an octave. Well, let's listen to our bridge here. Right now, it's just nothing's going on here. We need to start adding some stuff here. So let's grab another MIDI. We're just going to put it in E2, and we'll just duplicate that. Boom, 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 boom. Later on in the course, we're going to go deeper into these breakdowns, so I'm just going to leave that as is for now. Now we're going to add a high bass, and for this, let's start with just duplicating our initial Anna preset. Okay, and we're just going to tweak this a little bit. We can leave it mostly the same. We're just going to take that attack down. Tweak this curve a little bit. Then we're going to turn off this JU60, and we're going to replace it with a bit crusher. So let's turn up the rate a little bit and add some drive. So let's go ahead and grab roar again. And we're just gonna play with this. Go back to single routing, and let's choose Bit Crusher. We can do a little bit of a high pass on that. Let's go back and open up Anna real quick, and we are just going to remove some velocity and play with this cutoff. So now let's go over to our roar and let's add a little bit of movement. So I'm going to go over to our matrix here, and I'm going to turn up our envelope all the way on shaper 1 amount. And then we'll go over to mod envelope, and we can sort of dial this in a little bit. So let's move the frequency. We'll just make sure compression is off as well, and this adds just a little bit more movement to this sound. So let's grab an EQ, and let's get rid of some of those lows. Just gonna filter out those. And let's adjust our output down a little bit so we're not totally clipping. And I'm just gonna grab our compressor that we were using earlier for sidechaining, and I'm just going to copy that and paste it into here. Maybe be a little bit more gentle with it. And we could tweak this a little bit more if we wanted to, like maybe play with the dry wet on this distortion. Little EQ there. We can even boost the highs. Let's just duplicate that throughout the drop. Now we're going to add one more bass layer to this, and this is going to be bass distortion. So we'll just call this bass dist. Let's grab this, and just to start things off, let's go up a couple octaves with it, and then bring in Anna. Solo that for now. We'll come in here and clean it out. So for voice number 1, we're going to make sure retrigger is selected, and let's take this down a couple octaves. For our waveform, we're going to choose bode, and let's just start off by morphing that a little bit out the box and bringing up sync a little bit. Let's come over to our second oscillator. We'll turn that voice on. We'll leave it at 0, and we're going to grab more of like a 303 or acid wave table. So let's add acid 128. We'll add a bit of morph to that as well. And let's turn these down a little bit. We're going to use my favorite filter again. That's Mogi low pass. Turn that right down, and then let's assign the envelope to it. So we're going to add a touch of the envelope, and we'll add some resonance. Now we'll play with this. Cool, and I'm going to tweak the curve a little bit. Now we're going to take our mod envelope, and we're going to go over to morph on our first oscillator, and we're going to assign that to mod envelope 1. Let's take that sustain down, turn that release off, and let's play with this decay. Turn up the depth. Now we'll go over to our LFO, and we're just going to grab oscillator 2 volume and oscillator 2 morph. Let's keep loop on, change it to sync. We'll go up to 16th notes. And that's a pretty good place to start. We're going to turn on mono, turn down the polyphony, turn on slide. Excellent. Let's move into some of these effects. So for insert 1, Let's grab a wave shaper. Let's change the shape to rectifier and make sure we turn that on. And maybe a pinch of feedback here. Not too much, just a little bit. And for insert 2, let's grab a phaser. So that's in modulation, phaser. We'll turn it up to 12 poles. And let's turn the rate and depth all the way down. And then we can crank the whole thing through a limiter. We'll turn the dry wet all the way up and we'll take this down. Okay, and I think I want to take that down an octave on the first oscillator. Yeah, it's a little bit more aggressive now. So let's add some effects to this. We're going to start off by using Vela. And I'm going to turn the mix down and lock it. And then take the output, make that 0. And let's just turn off our late reverb here. And for our early reflections, we're going to go to real spaces and choose close. Now we can take the level up on that. And let's take a listen to it. Yeah, we'll make the size a little bit smaller, turn up that level. And then we'll grab JU60, throw a nice little chorus on there. And then a saturator for some distortion. Make sure soft clip is on, and let's choose medium curve. We're really going to push that. We'll take the output down. Let's expand this and play with our shape a little bit. We can grab our compressor from another one of these tracks. Just throw a little EQ in there, cut out some of those lows. And this is what our full stack sounds like. Cool, that about does it for the bass. I'm just going to clean this up, and in the next video, let's talk about some other synths that we're going to add.